Good day, my people. Such a pleasure to be with you once again. This weekend, our Old Testament reading taken from Isaiah 62, Psalm 96, second reading, 1 Corinthians 12, which is what I'm going to talk about actually, and our gospel reading, John chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. The gospel reading is fantastic, but last weekend in my message I mentioned briefly about it, about the Jesus performing the miracle of changing water into wine, and how that reflects on our own spiritual life, how that reflects on our journey. It is our lives that is being transformed, the ordinary becoming extraordinary. And I'm certain you're going to hear a great deal about that this weekend. But my focus this weekend, in fact, is going to be on the second reading, which speaks of a fairly interesting current issue. The reading is taken from St. Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, and it has always struck me as being very modern in its outlook. You would swear that Paul is talking about some church, some Catholic church just around the corner. And it's no wonder, because Corinth was a thriving cosmopolitan city back in those days, located on a narrow strip of land separating northern and southern Greece. Paul, in fact, spent 18 months there on his second missionary journey. The church had a multitude of problems. Which church does not have a multitude of problems? Gauging from the readings, including issues of head covering, issues of eating food sacrificed to idols, and issues concerning abuses at the Lord's Supper, where some people were actually getting drunk on the wine. But it is the issue of spiritual gifts and their relative merit in the church that seems to garner the most attention, and the one that seems to have an echo in our modern church life. And this is the one that I would like to deal with. It seems that the Corinthians, rather than celebrating one another's gifts in the church, became very prideful concerning their particular gifts and dismissive of the gifts of others. Therefore, spiritual gifts have become a divisive element among them in the church. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Division in the church. People reveling in their own self-importance and their God-given gifts. It's sometimes difficult to come to terms with, especially for persons whose faith is weak. You join a church and you start seeing the human side of the church. You thought you were going to be in a place where everybody loved each other, got along well with one another, and everyone was very passive and accommodating, but sometimes it's not like that at all. How do you cope with that? Well, these problems, especially division in the church, can come from several sources. One of the main elements is jealousy. There are people who fly into a rage when somebody receives praise in the church, and they don't receive praise as well. And then there are those who always feel as though they're closer to God than everybody else. And as such, they feel as though they are entitled to better treatment. They lord it over the others, and they like to instruct everyone. And then there are those who just like to show off. Church work is all about them. They love to be noticed. They love to be placed in situations where everyone is observing them. So all of this sounds as though the Pharisees have taken over the church all over again. And it leads to a church of confusion and rivalry, rather than a church where people work together for the common good. Not a pleasant place to be. I hope that is not your experience of church. Paul addresses this situation by calling for order and an appreciation for the variety of gifts in the church. He says that all gifts are important and they all come from the same source. And they are provided for the common spiritual good, not for entertainment or not for attracting to a particular person, which is interesting. That church ministry whether preaching, teaching, music, or some type of service, is not for entertainment. It is for the edification of others. It is for the upbuilding of each other. And it is interesting too that Paul points out in chapter 13, verse 13, that the highest of all the gifts is the gift of love. So my dear friends, whatever you do in the church, whatever capacity you are engaged in your particular church, do it quietly and do it without fanfare. Do it for God. He will recognize you in due course and reward you accordingly. And please, let us pray for unity and discipline and a service of simplicity and humility in our churches as well. God bless you all this weekend.